I call this meeting in order. Welcome to meeting number 28 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women. It is so nice to see witnesses joining us in person again. And Lisa, we are happy to have you at FEWO. Before we begin, so that members are aware, I have been informed that we have resources until 6:15 p.m. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Tuesday, February 1st, the committee will resume its study of resource development and violence against Indigenous women and girls. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation of those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience. I'll be putting up this red card as notice of your 1-minute warning, meaning that you have 60 seconds remaining. I would now like to welcome our witnesses from the Native Women's Association of Canada, Lisa J. Smith, Senior Director; from the Women of the Métis Nation, Melanie Omenello, President; from the Waniska Tan and Alliance of Hydro-Impacted Communities, Professor Dr. Jarvis Brownlee, and Associate Professor Dr. Ramona Kakoway; and finally from Nunavut, Tunangawik, Inc., we have Kilakawe Kabluna, Chief Executive Officer. They're online, and I know some of the witnesses have a problem with earphones, and so if the will of the committee, they can send up a submission, written submission, because the translate cannot do the translation. So they can do their submission. So yes. So you can send the submission and, by a clerk by tomorrow? By tomorrow, so we can do our translation. So over to Lisa. Go ahead. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am truly honored to be here amongst you. I'm told I'm the first in person since COVID. So I said, so I truly am honored to be here on unceded territory. So my name is Lisa Smith, as the Honorable Chair mentioned. I'm Senior Director of Governance, International and Parliamentary Relations, and that title is a lot taller than I am, but here we are. So as you know, the Native Women's Association of Canada, NWAC, is highly committed to ending the ongoing genocide of missing murdered Indigenous women and girls, MMIWG, and advocating for the implementation of the calls for justice of the National Inquiry's final report. Honorable members, Chair, there is a link between resource extraction and violence against Indigenous women, girls, transgender, and gender diverse people, as this honorable committee has identified. Therefore, it is essential to consider women's safety during all stages of resource extraction projects. Resource extraction projects usually create environments described as boom towns and man camps, where transient, non-Indigenous men who are paid high salaries come to work on these sites. These sites are reported to have increased rates of sexual violence and human trafficking. And oftentimes, honorable members, when we think of human trafficking, we think it doesn't take place in this beautiful country we call Canada, but of course it does. And these sites are certainly an area where that does occur. James Anaya, the former United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, investigated Canada in October 2013. I encourage everyone here to read his report. He reported to the Human Rights Council that extractive industries disproportionately impact Indigenous peoples, especially Indigenous women and girls living near oil, gas, and mining operations. It is important to remember that Indigenous women's physical, spiritual, and cultural relationship with the environment and its resources create an intimacy. Let's sit there. It creates an intimacy and invaluable knowledge base for program and policy development. So how did we get here? Colonial expansion is intrinsically linked with resource extraction. However, when C-15, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, received royal assent, advocates breathed a sigh of relief. And since this will ensure the minimum rights of Indigenous women, transgender, and gender diverse people will be upheld, minimum human rights, when Canada's policies and legislation are aligned with that act. Article 3 of UNDRIP states that Indigenous people have the right to self-determination. This guarantees the right to freely determine their political condition and the right to freely pursue their form of economic, social, and cultural development. And that is very much engaged in this discussion, so I thank you for having the discussion. According to James Anaya, one of the most dramatic contradictions is that Indigenous peoples in Canada face is that so many live in abysmal conditions on traditional territories that are full of valuable and plentiful natural resources. These resources are in many cases targeted for extraction and development by non-Indigenous interests. And I guess I should mention that, Truth and Reconciliation Day is coming up on September 30th. And, we must think about that, too, in this discussion. Indigenous languages that were attempted to lose or were lost during, residential school abuses, there's nuance, are more descriptive than Latin when they describe fauna and flora. So there's nuances there. So I will say, I have two things that I'll say. I'm getting the 60 seconds. NWAC understands that gender-based analysis must be culturally relevant. So I do have resources in both official languages that I can provide to the committee on that. So we call it a CRGBA, a culturally relevant gender-based analysis. And I also will say that NWAC also has a report that I can provide, Indigenous Women and Impact Assessment Final Report, and a quick guide. And so I'll just reiterate that we take guidance at NWAC from the MMIWG Final Report, and we want to recommend that a CRGBA lens is provided in a meaningful part of planning, assessment, implementation, management, and monitoring of resource development, so throughout the entire process. And I'll stop there, Honourable Chair. Again, it's such an honour to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Now we'll move to the Wani Ska Tan and Dr. Nakube. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Hi there. So actually, Dr. Brownlee and I have prepared a joint statement. So we're going to kind of tag team, if you will allow, and Dr. Brownlee is going to commence her presentation.
Okay. Hello, Honorable Chair and Committee. Thank you for including us in this very important process, and thank you for holding this inquiry in response to the National Inquiry's calls for justice. It's really heartening to see this happening. We are here representing the Waniskatan Alliance of Hydro-Impacted Communities, which is a group of academics and First Nation members who've spent years working collectively together to document and call attention to the adverse impacts of hydro projects on Manitoba First Nations. Dr. Nekaway, my colleague, has worked on hydro-related issues with her own community, Nisichawasik First Nation, and other affected First Nations for more than 15 years.
And I would like to take this opportunity and thank you as well. I speak to you today not just as an academic, but as a Cree woman and grandmother who has experienced the effects and impacts of hydropower. My colleague, Dr. Brownlee, has worked as part of the Wanuskatan community-based research team for the past 8 years, and we've learned firsthand from many community members about the ongoing effects they've experienced over the past 50 years as a result of hydropower operations on their territories, which affect nearly every aspect of their lives and communities.
So we submitted a brief to this committee in May, and in that brief we offered a short summary of some of the key impacts of hydropower, which enacts serious violence against the environment and the waters, despite its image as clean, green energy.
And so our languages, the water, the land, our families contain foundations, contain the foundations of social bonds, identity, community strength, and resilience. They also anchor us to the past and to the future. Hydropower combined with the multiple other harms resulting from practices of colonization have made the practice and transmission of our cultures much more difficult. Ongoing damage to land and water has resulted in great social and cultural harm, yet these types of consequences are not widely known.
The practice and teaching of Indigenous cultures happens out on the land and on the water. These were the sites where ceremony took place, and in many forms, this is where connections have always been forged with the land and with families. The disruption of these teachings and practices is itself a form of cultural violence. The cultural, linguistic, and spiritual loss that results from hydropower is a key factor in contributing to other forms of violence within Indigenous communities.
A recurring theme we hear from community partners and friends relates to grief and loss that has been suffered, including the loss of culturally meaningful and sacred places which have been destroyed. Life on the land and water was a focal point in the lives of our parents and their parents and so on. We're hearing concerns related to water and contamination of the waters, and even concerns related to mercury poisoning. Animals have moved away or been drowned in their burrows, and the ability to provide for families has been largely taken away. Today, many people have to travel far away from hydro-affected waters to hunt, trap, and fish. We want to be clear that there is a great deal of strength in our communities, but for many, providing the basis of life for themselves and their families, just ensuring they have water to drink and food to eat remains an ongoing struggle.
In recent years, members of several Manitoba First Nations have spoken out about the prevalence of violence committed by members of hydro construction crews, both in the past and in recent times, disclosing that many women were sexually assaulted by workers who lived in those temporary hydro construction camps. 4 Manitoba First Nations have recently called for a public inquiry into these abuses, which were also documented in the 2018 Regional Cumulative Effects Assessment Report by the Clean Environment Commission, and we support this call for inquiries into these abuses. Indigenous societies understand water as a living being that must be respected and protected. This understanding of water makes the harm from hydro dams even more painful and dangerous and a form of violence. They also understand women as having a special relationship to water, in part through the water associated with carrying and birthing babies. Because of this, women have a special responsibility to protect water and tend a relationship with it. Canada's exclusion of Indigenous women from a voice in relation to water and water use is another form of cultural violence that also squanders important knowledge and strength that would benefit Canadian society. We also want to stress that these communities have suffered a lot of harm from hydro dams, but they're also communities with a lot of strength, and there are concrete steps that can be taken to reduce and partly reverse the damage from hydropower. and we'd be happy to talk about that more. Steps to help communities regain safety and identity and cohesion, and even more importantly, to support the revitalization and transmission of languages and cultures as the essential foundation for healthy, thriving communities.
Thank you, Dr. Brownlee and Dr. Neku. Finally, from Nunavut Tungavik Inc., Kilika Kalbuna, floor to you, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kilik Kabdanak. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Nunavut Tungavik. We are responsible for upholding the Nunavut Agreement, a constitutionally protected treaty. I'm joining you virtually from Iqaluit, Nunavut, with really slow internet speed, so if I get disconnected, I will try to connect again. Before I begin, I would like to recognize Savannah Pikuyak, a 22-year-old from Sanerayak who moved to Ottawa earlier this month to attend college to become a nurse. She was murdered by her landlord, a man who was on probation after being convicted and sentenced for assaulting his former girlfriend. Violence against Inuit women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ QIA+, including in the resource sector, is a systemic issue based in colonization. The racist and discriminatory legacy of colonization disrupts, undermines, and ignores Inuit women's place in society, including diminishing their roles and responsibilities as Inuit. Colonization leaves Inuit women untethered from their identities, families, and communities, with patriarchal values informed by colonial standards that replace Inuit values. From colonization, there is a long history of racialized gender-based violence that has been perpetrated on Inuit women. Today, in the Nunavut context, this is Inuit women being forced to accept low-wage work on rotational basis at a mining camp and leaving their children for 2 weeks at a time with extended family. On the other hand, if governments had provided the training guaranteed under Article 23 of the Nunavut Agreement, many of these women would be working in their home communities as nurses, teachers, or administrators of their local governments. More specifically in resource development, Reclaiming Power and Place found that Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ QIA+ people across Canada have been targets of violence due to their communities being near natural resource industries. The culture of gender-based violence fostered within these camps has been described as one that exacerbates isolation, drug and alcohol abuse, violence, misogyny, hypermasculinity, and racism among the men living there, which all contribute to Indigenous women and girls being at a high risk for experiencing violence. In Nunavut, there is a lack of information about the connection between resource extraction and human trafficking. Further considerations and research into violence mitigation strategies as they relate to man camps is a high need for all communities in proximity to resource extraction. I was encouraged by Budget 2021's funding commitment of $2.2 billion over 5 years to respond to the tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Our territory was devastated 14 days later with Emerald McDonald's murder in Kokolokto. I am discouraged by bureaucratic delays in accessing this funding. As far as I'm aware, none of the funding announced in Budget 2021 has been spent in Nunavut. Funding for one shelter has been committed. I would be pleased to accept your questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Ms. Kabluna. Thank you very much for your time. Now we are going to start of our 6-minute round. We are going to start with the CPC, Michelle Furry. I'm going to pass the floor to you, Michelle. Over to you, 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to all of our guests who are joining us in person and virtually. I would love to start with Ms. Kabluna. Ms. Kabluna, I want to say that I had the privilege to visit your beautiful territory this summer and was in Iqaluit, and it is absolutely outstanding and beautiful, beautiful place that you have a lot to be proud of. And thank you so much for telling us about the young woman who was murdered and by somebody who obviously was known to the police as well. If I may, Ms. Kabluna, if I can just clarify something you had said, you said they had a government, the government has an agreement to honor for training. Can you just clarify that point again?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The government of Canada and the government of Nunavut have a constitutionally protected treaty with the Nunavut of Inuit. It's called the Nunavut Agreement. Under this agreement, Article 23 is about Inuit employment in government to a representative level, so 85%. Currently, the government of Nunavut is at approximately 50% Inuit employment, and the government of Canada is approximately 30% Inuit employment. Article 23 outlines the steps to achieve representative Inuit employment, including pre-employment training. The agreement was signed in 1993, and it was expected that training would occur in our communities in all government-related fields, so teaching, nursing, accounting, law, and that Inuit would take the positions within our communities. That training has not occurred. In 2015, there was a settlement between the Government of Canada and Nunavut for its failures to train Inuit for government positions. We are still concerned with the slow pace of this training, and as a result, Inuit women often have no choice but to accept low-paying work on rotational basis at camps such as mining camps. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that answer. And has there been any reason given to you why this training hasn't been provided? And has there also been any discussion in terms of including Inuit into how they can be a part of the hiring process, but also equal to be trained? But has there been any reason given why the training hasn't happened?
Thank you for that question. Currently, the government is stating that it is not enforceable. The timelines and the targets are not enforceable, and so there is no there's no way forward to training. It's just an open-ended commitment. We challenge that and expect that pre-employment training plans and targets would be put into force. Of course, they would need to be adapted based on new information and address new challenges. We'd like to see new campus facilities built. We'd like to see more training programs in our communities, daycares for our students to attend training, a number of initiatives under Article 23. That is There is some interest in both governments for a pre-employment training strategy, but we would like to see more progress on that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kabuna, and I know I'm probably running out of time, so I just want to say into the record, you would like to see some accountability on follow-through, that this training needs to happen so that these young women can be making the wages that they need to get out of a poverty cycle. So the government obviously needs to be following through on what they're saying and doing what they say, not just writing the words.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, Michelle. Before I go to next member, can I ask Ms. Nakwe, can you put your mic just a little bit up? Thank you. Thank you. Now I'll pass over to Anita Vanveld.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And before I begin, I'd also like to honor Savannah Pikuyak, who came to study in my riding and was murdered in my riding. And all she wanted to do was study nursing and was new to Ottawa. And it clearly shows we have to do more. So thank you very much, Ms. Kabluna, for bringing that up, and also sympathies to her community and her family. I wanted to start my questions to Ms. Smith. You mentioned something that got my ear. You mentioned CRGBA, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the first time that that particular term has been mentioned in this committee. But culturally relevant gender-based analysis. I think it'd be of interest to all of us if you could perhaps elaborate a little bit on that.
Thank you for your question. I think having a gender-based analysis that's culturally relevant for Indigenous women, girls, gender-diverse peoples looks like it has to be trauma-informed, right? So we don't want to perpetuate, colonial attitudes in our gender-based analysis, and we have to be very safeguard our policies so that, those colonial attitudes aren't enriched by our policies, even though there is a gender-based analysis. So I'll just say that our report, which I will send in both official languages, says that the CRGBA considers the historical and current issues faced by Indigenous women, including the impacts that colonialization and intergenerational trauma have caused. And we go on to talk about a risk of perpetuating further marginalization, oppression, and violence against Indigenous women, as I mentioned. But if it's helpful to the committee, I can certainly send this report, as I said, in both official languages.
Yes, indeed. I think we would very much appreciate that. And the other thing you alluded to, and it's something that we see quite often, both internationally and here in Canada, is this concept of rich land, poor people. And one of the things we've heard in this study is that even if women are finding jobs in the resource extraction sector, it's often low-paying and very precarious work. They're not in the leadership positions. They're not the CEOs, the executives, the board. And even if they get to those board positions, there's a toxic culture that pushes them back out. I wonder if you could give us a little bit of a suggestion about what we do to make sure that the women there are also benefiting from the tremendous wealth that the land and the resources provide.
Thank you again for that question. It's very well put. And I think it goes back to, really understanding and having space for Indigenous women leadership. That's so important in climate action. Like I said, I kind of went off my notes and said about Indigenous languages and the nuances that we've lost. Well, I would say, too, that Indigenous leadership and Indigenous knowledge in general can really help in terms of climate action, yes, but in terms of all our interactions with the land and water, right? Because there is that specialized knowledge there, especially as Indigenous women, that we hold. And so it's creating a space for truly understanding that and then applying it, right? So it's okay to study that connection, but also we must ensure that it's implemented, and given high regard in terms of the entire process of resource extraction. It is something that I feel very passionate about, and I'm happy to submit further to the committee on that as well.
I do have another question for Dr. Nekaway and Mr. Brownlee. In your testimony, you spoke about land and water and the intrinsic connection between that and culture and gender. And usually when we think about land and water, we think of physical health, but we don't always think about culture. And certainly we don't think about culture in terms of how women are more connected. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that. And again, looking at the potential avenues where we can actually, rather than causing harm, we can make this something that will have benefit.
Yes, thank you for the question. We've been thinking a lot about solutions as we've worked with communities, and the thing that our community partners talk about all the time is culture, the harm to culture because of residential schools and other colonial histories, but very much because of the hydro dams and that's ongoing damage. And they talk about the fact that restoring the culture is essential to heal the communities and reverse some of the negative effects of colonialism. And in doing so, we can restore women to the position that they held in Cree societies before colonization, which was a position of honor and authority and equality. And women were seen to have a special connection to water because they partly it's associated with the water in the womb, that in which babies are carried, and the water that breaks when babies are born. Women also traditionally were responsible for being midwives, of course, bringing children into the world, and also at the time of death, caring for the deceased, and all of that involved water. So there's this very holistic body of understanding that associates women and water, and women have a special responsibility to water. And you'll see that with women holding water walks in these times, trying to protect and heal the water.
Thank you, Dr. Brownell. Thank you, Anita. Now I want to move to Madame LaRouche. So you have a 6-minute, Andrew.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for being with us this afternoon to continue this study. The context is quite particular. We're a few days away from September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So that is the context in which we are meeting today. And Ms. Smith, you talked about it. You talked about this date. And I would like for you to tell us more. On a national day, we hope that it won't be just a regular holiday, that we will take this day to learn. In the context of today's study, what would you like us to reflect on, and what could we do on September 30th?
Thank you for that question. That's an excellent question, and I apologize for not speaking in your in French. I wrote an article today on that very issue. And, of course, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released 94 calls to action, and that was obligations on governments and civil society. But, in my opinion, truth and reconciliation is everybody's obligation, and so you and I have a role to play in that. It's decolonizing your thoughts, right? Questioning. So in this committee, when you go back and you reflect on our testimonies and you read the reports, deconstruct. I went to law school, and so I have formal colonial education. And so I am consistently trying to decolonize those thoughts. I said, I'm going to share a story with you briefly, Honorable Chair. I was in a meeting and I was humiliated, but that's a part of Truth and Reconciliation, because I had said to a chief that the Supreme Court of Canada said whatever it was they said, and I said that's the law, that's the reality. And the chief looked at me and said, yeah, according to the Supreme Court of Canada, we have to question these things. We have to decolonize our thoughts and what we knew. And that's the process of Truth and Reconciliation. It's not supposed to be easy, right? It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be reflective. And I ask everyone on September 30th to reflect, right? To question things that you took for granted your entire life. That's not easy, right? But that's all we can ask of you. But I want everyone to remember we're all in this together, right? We're all fighting the same fight, so we need to lean on each other, and we need to grieve. I think grieving is a part of Truth and Reconciliation as well. And I know the Council of Truth and Reconciliation has an interactive map. I encourage everyone to look at that map, to look at how plentiful residential schools were, and to look at the facts therein, and to have an intimate knowledge of that and grieve that, and then go back to committee, read your reports with that lens, and question what you always took for granted. And like I said, it's not easy, but it's worthwhile. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you for reminding us of the importance of September 30th, and hopefully I'll be able to come back to you in the second round with other questions. My next question is for Dr. Brownlee. You talked about the link between water and women. And for me, there's something that is unfair, that so many Indigenous communities still do not have clean water. A lot of communities don't have what is essential for living. And not having clean water can lead to poverty, and there's a link between poverty and violence. And can you tell us how important it is for the government to act and give these communities access to clean waters that they still don't have?
Thank you very much for your question. I would like to answer in French, but my French is too rusty, so I will answer in English, but it's nice to hear French. Yes, the fundamental problem with drinkable water is that we've contaminated our rivers and lakes. I hear from the community members that Ramona and I work with, they for thousands of years, if they needed water, they would dip their cup in the lake and drink, or dip their cup in the water. And the rivers and lakes in northern Manitoba used to be as clear as glass. You could see all the way to the bottom. And now they're mud soup, full of chunks of mud and whole dead trees, and dead animals and debris from the hydro dams and the water level manipulations. We wouldn't need water treatment centers in these communities if we weren't destroying the water and the land. So that's, this is where extractive industries, again, are something that we need to overhaul. We need to do things differently, because that would be the solution if we just let the lakes and rivers return to the healthy state they used to be in. At the same time, I agree, until that happens, it is a national disgrace that we have whole communities that don't have drinkable water. And I know that the government has committed to ensuring that all communities do have drinkable water, but we are not there yet. And I just heard from one of our community members. I asked them what they wanted us to say to you all today, and one was talking about the burden every day of on women. The women carry the burden of trying to ensure they have just drinking water every day for their families.
Thank you, Dr. Brownlee. Thank you, Madam LaRouche. Now we move to Leah Gazan. Go ahead, Leah, for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much. My first question is for Dr. Jarvis Brownlee. So good to see my friend here. Just a question. So in the last Parliament, we passed Bill C-15 to see the adoption and implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which includes Article 22. One, particular attention shall be paid to the rights and special needs of Indigenous elders, women, youth, children, and persons with disabilities in the implementation of this declaration. And two, states shall take measures in conjunction with Indigenous people to ensure that Indigenous women, children enjoy the full protection and guarantees against all forms of violence and discrimination. We also accepted the calls for justice that came out of the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Women and Girls. I want to point specifically to call for justice 13.1. We call on all resource extraction and development industries to consider safety and security of Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people, as well as their equitable benefit from development at all stages of project planning, assessment, implementation, management, and monitoring. Where are we at? I say we're failing. Particularly because I put in an order paper question on June the 20th, asking specifically around where the government, what progress they've made in what towards benefit agreements that ensure the security and safety of Indigenous women and girls, 2S LGBTQIA+, activities that have been co-developed to mitigate this current crisis of violence. What has been, how much attention has been placed to supporting an analysis of gender disaggregated data, and how much money has been spent through the Aboriginal Community Safety Plan. And, to my disappointment, actually, most of the money has been spent on training, which is great in resource extraction, but we can't talk about economic benefit without social costs, and certainly it's costing the safety of Indigenous women and girls and diverse gender folks. And in fact, there's currently in this area under $13 million a year for the whole country that's being spent to address this crisis. So I know that one of the things that you mentioned is the impact, the burden that is on women, particularly in communities, in hydro-affected communities in Manitoba. You've also come up with policies and solutions. So I'm wondering, what recommendations you have, solutions to end this kind of violence. What do you think needs to be done to really critically address this ongoing genocide?
Thank you, Leah, for the question. And I think Ramona and I will both answer. And Ramona, I think, will have some thoughts on the programming funds and resources for cultural programming. But just in terms of changing the situation, these communities need to have a say. UNDRIP says that Indigenous peoples have the right to control their territories. They have the right to self-determination. They have the right to decide what happens in their territories. They have the right to free, prior, and informed consent. Now, the hydro dams, many of them are 50 years old, so it's a fait accompli. But what we're saying is things can still be done differently. The dams aren't going to be removed, but the water level manipulations are a big part of the problem. And if Manitoba Hydro would work with communities and including women and consult and really listen, we could have major improvements. There's a program by which they depart from the original water levels allowable. If we could go back to the original water levels, that would help a lot. Ramona, do you want to talk about? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask a question specifically of Dr. Nekaway. So one of the things we've heard in terms of earlier testimonies, like free, prior, informed consent, absolutely doesn't happen often. But even when there's consent that occurs, often it's in the absence of women's voices. Would you agree with that statement? And if so, or if not, can you please expand?
That's a complicated question. And I think there certainly has been an absence of women. That's partly due to, I think, the structures that are being used, the consent process. Again, when we think about, the level of education in the communities, not everybody speaks English as their first language. There's a lot of pressures that may impact the ability to provide consent or even provide enough of a description so that folks know what's going on in the communities can be problematic at times. But I haven't investigated that myself, but from what from having conversations and the work that we've done with people, I think an observation that can be drawn is that there isn't, a lot of direct involvement of women, in that process. And if I could just chime in, I know you asked Dr. Brownlee about possible solutions.
Thank you, Dr. Nekwe. Thank you. And thank you, Leah. Now we are moving to our second round. And second round, we'll start from Dominic Nguyen. We have 5 minutes. Go ahead, Dominic.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to all of our witnesses. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I would like to know how we can find a common goal to rally people around to make sure that violence against women and girls disappears. How can we support women and girls in their leadership? But I would also like to hear you talk about resource exploiting communities, civil societies, police organizations, municipalities. How do we gather all of these people around one concrete goal? How can we do it quickly and concretely to change things? Ms. Smith, I'll start with you.
That's a powerful question. I thank you for asking it. I'll touch on a couple of things. I think you said common goal. How do we get there together? I do want to say that we need to encourage men and boys to be a part of this discussion. There is a toxic masculinity, and we need men and boys to feel a part of this discussion as well. We need them to feel safe, to be emotional, which is usually, under that umbrella of toxic masculinity, a lot of time men and boys don't feel comfortable in emotional spaces. So they need to be a part of this fight as well. And I think that will help bring a common goal if we all kind of work together, not just segregate women and gender diverse, but also bring men and boys into that discussion as well. And at NWAC, we have toolkits and toxic masculinity that can be used in community. But it's such a good point. I think as we're coming up this theme, if we look in the lens of reconciliation, let's focus, and I think a common goal people can rally behind is economic reconciliation, right? And so many of these issues are because of poverty and because women specifically aren't benefiting from the resource development. And, so the MMIWG report calls that economic marginalization. And that's one of the reasons why we find ourselves in this genocide. And so if we fill that gap and we get people to rally, and our men and boys in on this, and rally behind economic reconciliation, then...
Mais comment on fait ça?
But how can we do this, Ms. Smith?
Wait, I think...
C'est compliqué. Je sais.
I know it's a complicated question. If it were simple, we wouldn't be here this afternoon.
Well, I think that, I'm trying really hard to foster positive relationships with police, with civil society, and these sorts of things. And I think we have to, maybe it's not this simple, but I'm going to put it in a simple way. I think as Canadians, we all want the same thing at the end of the day, right? We want our women, our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, our nieces to stop being killed, to stop being murdered. And I think that's where we start, right? It is a common goal at the end of the day of all of us. But we all speak different languages. The police, I'm a former Crown prosecutor, we speak a different language. So it's having that common language. And so often us lawyers,
Madame Smith.
Ms. Smith, to your knowledge, are there efforts being made at boards of large companies or municipal organizations with Indigenous women in order to raise awareness? Is that something that's being done?
Il faut que ça passe.
Because it has to go through them as well.
I honestly don't see much action on the municipal and side of things because, as you know, the calls for justice, the calls to action really focus on provincial, federal policymakers, also law societies and civil society in that regard. We're not seeing as much, obligations put on industry or municipalities. So I think you identified something really, really good there. And I think maybe you're answering your own question. Maybe that's how, we need to all come together. And I think, though, I'm thinking here. I think when we try to, with C15, which has been brought up, with ONDRIP being a part, Canada is leading the way in ONDRIP implementation. And when we align all policies and legislation with ONDRIP, I think that's the answer, right? It's a part of the answer. It's more complicated than that. But I think we're going in the right direction in that regard. But you're right, more attention and awareness and education needs to be focused on the community level.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Thank you, Dominic. Now we move to Jenna. Jenna, go ahead for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for the excellent work they're doing and for sharing their expertise with us today. I think I will take my first question to Ms. Caballona. I believe that there was some work done by your organization, some research into women's economic security and prosperity, specific to the resource extraction industry. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that study and the results or output from that.
Thank you for that question. I believe you're referring to a report that has been initiated by Pauktutit, the National Inuit Women's Organization. It's an introductory review of extractive industries in Inuit Nunangat, which is all across Canada's north, so from the Yukon to Labrador, northern Labrador. And it is the basis of a lot of the context that I had provided earlier. We're very specifically involved under Article 23 of the Nunavut Agreement for employment opportunities for Inuit women, and also under the Nunavut Agreement, we have the land title to some portions of land in Nunavut. And under that, we have 3 operating mines. These are grandfathered land leases with the Government of Canada. So they were leases with mining companies established before Nunavut was created. And we have inherited the agreements under the federal government system. Those 3 mines are operated on Inuit-owned land, and so we are also involved in supporting Inuit in that context, Inuit women and Inuit workers in that context. Under those agreements, we have Inuit impact and benefit agreements with the mining companies and require training of Inuit. The mining companies have lower Inuit employment levels than the governments. They do have more robust training programs for their staff under the IIBAs, Inuit Impact and Benefit Agreements, but they've all stagnated in Inuit employment and largely employ Inuit at the lower levels of income. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. And maybe just a follow on to that, from your perspective, what will it take or what is needed in order to incentivize in these agreements for a higher level of Inuit employment?
Well, there are penalties under the agreements that we have. I would note, though, that most of the land in Nunavut is still under Crown control, and that process is separate. On Inuit-owned land, there is a system whereby communities and regions need to agree to exploration prior to it occurring. On Crown land, though, which is the majority of the territory, that doesn't exist. It's a web-based system for staking land. So somebody could be staking land definitely from outside of the territory, and they only have an obligation to do exploration within 2 years in order to maintain that stake. After exploration has occurred, it goes through approval process when companies want to develop or do more exploration. At that point, communities are often told that it's too expensive. It's cost money to do the work so far, and so there's some pressure for communities to approve the project, even though they had no say in whether the project would be explored. And part of that reason is under the Nunavut Agreement, there's also a requirement to complete a Nunavut land use plan. Right now, actually, in Rankin Inlet, there are hearings happening on the draft Nunavut land use plan. So here we are in 2022, almost 30 years after the Nunavut Agreement was signed, and we still don't have established boundaries on where environmental protection will occur, where mining will occur, where cultural activities will occur. And so there is an open system to take staking.
Thank you, Ms. Kabuna. Thank you, Jenna. Now, I will now pass it over to Madame LaRouche. Andrin, go ahead for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you again to the witnesses, and thank you for reminding us of the importance of examining this issue. I've been listening to all you have to say, and I would like to reiterate that if we want to get to something concrete, I like to say that we need to have discussions nation to nation. And I know we want to find solutions. We have the calls for justice from the report, and there are calls to action. I am a member of the group that examines modern slavery and human trafficking. There are many proposals that exist. We talk about funds, but we also hear that funds are not making it to the people who need it. And I find it sad. And Ms. Kabluna, I would like to end by reiterating my sympathies for your community. It's not another woman, it's one woman too many. You've been talking about the agreement, but that nothing's happening on the field. Do you think it's a lack of political will to talk nation to nation and to focus on this issue?
We have been developing a relationship with the Government of Canada through the Inuit to Crown Partnership Committee, and we've seen considerable progress over the last few years. There are still challenges with the bureaucracy. Most recently in June, the Inuit to Crown Partnership Committee approved an Inuit Nunangat policy. And so this is a policy to guide bureaucracy through relationships with Inuit. So we have some optimism that that will help, but I agree it is disappointing that the funding has not flowed. We are ready to do the work, and with our own money, we have been doing quite a bit of work. We've put money into shelters and taking steps where we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kabluna. Thank you, Andrea. Now I'll pass it to Leah. Leah, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. And just want to follow up with Dr. Nakaway. You had written a brief to the committee supporting specifically Call to Justice 13.4, and I'm really proud of our committee that we actually heeded that call to justice in this study. But you state specifically in that brief, in quotes, at a minimum, we support the call of Indigenous women and leaders for a public inquiry into the sexual violence and racism at hydroelectric projects in northern Manitoba. So my question for you is, who do you think needs to be part of that public inquiry, and what do you want to see as a result of that public inquiry? I know we have limited time. I apologize, but you can submit a written brief after.
Okay, we would welcome that. And so I think that's a great question. We do support something like that. Again, the federal government needs to be involved in that. The provincial government needs to be involved in that. And again, the federal government has a fiduciary responsibility, and they've been largely absent from conversations. And so, there was a cumulative study undertaken provincially, but it was, to put it bluntly, pretty inadequate. And we need a study to actually look at the effects and impacts of this this particular industry in Manitoba and what it means for folks on the ground. I don't think we have a good view of what that looks like quite yet. So
no, I appreciate that, and I also just want to note the correlation you're making between like resource extraction and impacts on community. I would point that in Manitoba, it's a hydro-rich province, yet in northern Manitoba we have the second worst housing conditions in the country. So can you please comment, either one of you, on the fact that often people are pushing resource extraction where communities get all the impacts and none of the benefits? I think Manitoba Hydro in many ways emulates that, either or if you'd like to comment on that.
Ramona, you want me to start? Yes, that is exactly the situation. That electric power is being extracted from northern Manitoba for the benefit of Southerners in southern Manitoba, but then some of the power is sold to other provinces and American states, and the benefits go to Manitobans largely, and to Manitoba Hydro itself, and to the provincial government, which gets a lot of money from Manitoba Hydro, but the benefits don't go to Northern First Nations. And in recent years, we've seen some partnership agreements between Manitoba Hydro and First Nations, which make it look as if there's a broader consent and a partnership happening, but these deals are actually very, very poor deals for First Nations. They still aren't getting a lot of benefits. They're not getting even the benefits that were promised, and still the harms continue. There was a treaty made in 1977, the Northern Flood Agreement. It's been nullified, first by just delaying everything and litigating everything, and eventually by passing new agreements.
Thank you, Dr. Brownlee. Thank you, Leah.
Yeah.
And now I'll pass over to Shelby to start our third round for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Shelby.
Just before we begin, I was just respecting that of the new schedule, the amended schedule. The notice of the amended meeting. I'm comfortable going. I'm more than comfortable going ahead.
Yes,
but
in the start we said that we'll go over a little bit. Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, then, certainly happy to continue. Thank you to all of the witnesses that have shared their testimony and their comments, concerns, questions, queries, what have you. I think as far as I see this, there's two main issues that this committee is concerned of with regards to this. First of all, there's the issue of ensuring that our Indigenous communities benefit positively from resource development. That's clearly step one for all of us, and we're hearing that in the testimony. Furthermore, we need to ensure that internally the women of these communities benefit as well. And again, I can suggest that we're hearing that in compliments from all the different testimony. But how can we ensure that second point? And is there something that should be happening at the community and company level in the contracts? For example, because corporate responsibility needs to come into play here. Corporate responsibility and accountability, I think that's paramount here. So is there something that we can do to promote more action in the community, and how can we get more women involved in making these decisions, and how can we involve more Indigenous communities in the resource development of these particular resources? If I could pose that question to Lisa Smith, she's in the room with us. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. And it is something that's very important when we talk about this issue. It's intrinsically linked into this issue by virtue of the calls for justice of the MMIWG, I think 13.2, I believe. I don't have the calls in front of me. And I think so often we say, oh, funding, but funding equals capacity. When the funding is, I guess, streamed correctly, as we heard today, that's probably not always the case, unfortunately. But I think we need Indigenous leadership. We need Indigenous women need the capacity to advise and ensure that their specialized knowledge, by virtue of being an Indigenous woman, is really a part of the entire process. Now, it's harder when the players are industry and the province, to be quite frank. So how do we ensure that all players around the table are providing capacity for Indigenous leadership to be a part of the entire process? I think that, is it political will? Is it, I'm not sure, but I think funding is a part of that process, and I think upholding our inherent rights, and really, I guess, getting everyone on board. And again, I think C15 and ONDRIP, I don't want to be naive about its reach, but I'm thinking that is a part of how we get there.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Perhaps what I'll do now is move on to a quick question for either Professor Dr. Jarvis or Dr. Ramona. You mentioned in your testimony that there had been concrete steps that had been taken to reverse the damages that you identified regarding the hydro development in Manitoba. Could you possibly elaborate on what those concrete steps were? Thank you.
I believe what we said was that concrete steps could be taken. They haven't been.
Okay, perhaps, thank you for that clarity. Do you have any suggestions or ideas on what some next steps could be?
Yes. Thank you for the question. Well, we need the communities to have a say, and not just consultation, because consultation, as currently practiced, is not listening. It's just they send people into the communities in suits, and they may give people an opportunity to talk, but it doesn't change anything. They don't change their plans. We need
so perhaps, I don't mean to interrupt you,
for communities.
Maybe one quick thing for clarity. If we can perhaps avoid having people from positions of authority and getting Indigenous communities and people involved from the community that are not necessarily from that of suits, as you called it, or positions of authority, would that be an example of a concrete step?
Yes. And I didn't mean to be, when I said suits, I didn't mean to insult anyone. It's just the way the community members have talked to me, because they have an immediate reaction to that. It sort of sends a certain message. As you say, it sends a message of authority.
Okay, no insult taken. All
Thank
good.
you, Dr. Brown. Thank you, Shelby. Now, next up, we have Emanuela. Emanuela, over to you for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to first thank all of the witnesses who are here with us today to inform us and to help us come up with some solutions to some of the issues that are facing Indigenous women and girls due to resource extraction. Most of my questions at this point have been answered, but I'm going to go a little bit higher level. And I guess, Mrs. Smith, you were speaking a little bit earlier about what potential solutions could look like and how to get more people involved in implementing sustainable and lasting change so that women and girls are less impacted in a negative way and benefit more from resource extraction. And the conversation you were having with my colleague earlier was making me think also of what potential solutions could be. And I'm curious to see, because there are issues at several levels, but whether it's in government, whether it's in policing, whether it's in the communities themselves, whether it's the companies that are doing the extraction of resources, getting more women involved at all of these levels, I think, would be key and important, because in order to change, well, I think what's needed here is a cultural change at every single level. Can you comment a little bit further on that?
Yes, thank you for that. I completely agree with everything you said, and thank you for the question. I think something I forgot to mention that's key to this is that, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, focused on the truth, getting the truth out there. Now we need to focus on reconciliation, and reconciliation as a word requires action. So what does that look like? And I thank the entire committee, because I think everyone from the questions being posed is concerned about concrete action and outcomes, and I'm very glad to hear that. And I think we need to focus on healing now. Right? We need to heal as a country. Indigenous peoples need to heal. And so something that NWAC is doing that I would love to inform everyone, because we're hoping for it to be far-reaching in every province and territory in this country, we have what's called a Resiliency Lodge, and the pilot project was done in Chelsea, Quebec, and it's a huge success. And so it's healing traumas from residential schools. It's connecting with the land, and that in itself gives women courage to be a part of the process. Because as you can imagine, violence against Indigenous women and colonialism prevents women to have the confidence to sometimes be involved and share their knowledge. And so we need to really focus on that. We just opened up, we're about to open up another Resiliency Lodge in New Brunswick, Wabanaki, and that's going to have, we bought a farm, there's we're saving turtles, we're reconnecting with the land, and it's going to look different in every province and territory. But our dream, our vision at NWAC is to roll them out. We have a pilot project that worked in Chelsea. We want to roll them out across this nation, and then that's a concrete action which I think the committee is looking for in terms of where do we go from here. Well, we need to heal our people. We need to heal this country. Thank you.
If you don't mind, maybe sending us some of the information that came out of that would be great, and maybe tabling it to the committee so that we have it and can use it in our recommendations later on.
I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I guess for the remainder of my time, I'm not sure, Ms. Nekaway, if you were Dr. Nekaway, if you were able to explain what possible solutions were to undo the damage caused by the hydro dams in these communities. If Mr. Brownlee or Ms. Nekaway wants to continue on that and give us some concrete solutions. I know that you mentioned bringing the water level back to the level it was at before, knowing that most likely they won't be removing the dams. Do you have any other recommendations in that area?
Why don't I start this one? I think the reference to the regulating of the waters is, correct me if I'm wrong, Jarvis, but it's with respect to the CRD license and some of the parameters that originally were built in that would stabilize the shorelines. Again, we're talking about pretty substantive waterways and rivers and tributaries in northern Manitoba. So we've got 3 pretty significant waterways in the north that have been dammed and diverted, if you will. And to borrow from a colleague of ours, just finding a way to operationalize the system, so that that isn't so severe. We've got times when water is really high. This summer, water is really low at our end of the hydro system. So that's one thing that you can do. Start thinking about cultural revitalization. What is that going to look like? How are you going to help communities to access land and territory that is now either inaccessible because there's just simply too much debris. The water is moving and flowing just dangerously too fast for anybody to be able to access it. How are you going to help us revitalize language and culture? Programs. How is this going to be carried out in and at the community level, both supported by government and industry? So again, as we stated in our opening statement, the land and the water for our communities.
Thank you, Dr. Nakwe. Thank you. So now we're going to move to Madame Larouche. You can go ahead for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We're trying to find solutions because to see in 2022 the impacts of the resource sector on women and girls is unacceptable. And you mentioned it with C15. It is important to recognize the rights of Indigenous people. And for a long time, it was something that Canada didn't want to do. And it's part of Canada's image abroad, how they treat their Indigenous people. So if you have anything else to add, because you talked a lot about C15 and how it could be useful. But if you or any of the other witnesses have an answer on another idea, that's fine. But I'll start by getting you to answer Ms. Smith on the importance of how we treat our Indigenous people here in Canada and to come back on C15 because it is very important.
Thank you. I did a lot of work on advocating for ONDRIP implementation, and so I'm just thrilled that C15 received royal assent. And I think a key component of C15 is, I'm going to focus on this, right, is the alignment with policies and legislation. Ergo, that means that in everything Canada does, we'll have to align with the declaration, which gives us, and so often people forget, that's minimal. That's the floor of human rights for Indigenous peoples. So when this hasn't been done yet, yes, the bill was passed, right? But once all our policies and our laws are truly aligned with C15, then our basic human rights as Indigenous peoples will be upheld. There's still work to be done. But it's encouraging. It's encouraging that the government passed this bill and that's the way we're going. And I also think I think you may have touched on this earlier, a lot of this advocacy and getting on the same page is communication. Right? And so I think there needs to be a focus on that, on awareness and educating. We're plugged in, the people around this table, we're plugged in, but to really, truly educate and make Canadians aware, perhaps sometimes in plain language, will help this cause and we'll come together as a country, hopefully, and with the guidance of ONDRIP, I think we're going to get somewhere. We're not there yet, but I'm encouraged that we will get there.
Absolutely. And we all believe that. And I was going to ask a question of the other witness, and I'm running out of time. But you also mentioned these boom towns, because I would like to come back to the responsibilities of businesses that are doing resource development and that hire employees, and that's what leads to these boom towns. So these companies that exploit resources should put in place measures to counter this violence. We talked about all the rest, but in concrete solutions, we could talk about the adoption of a federal policy in order to frame these companies that exploit resources in Canada, specifically when we talk about harassment and violence. And you talked about boom towns, Ms. Smith, in your comments, but if Mr. Brownlee has anything to add, Ms. Ikowe or Ms. Kaluna, please do.
Um, Thank you for the question. I know it's enticing to think about concrete solutions. I stand by a lot of the comments that had been made earlier by all of the panelists here in terms of fully implementing UNDRIP. In Nunavut, I want to speak to our majority language. In Nunavut is the only jurisdiction in Canada where the majority homogeneous language of the population is not English or French. Yet it's Inuktitut or Inuktitut. Yet this is very often the last language where materials are prepared on any resource project. And so it results in a lot of people not knowing about the project through the environmental review process. We want to see the Official Languages Act in Nunavut recognize that Inuktitut is the majority language
Thank you,
in
Ms.
Nunavut.
Thank you, Ms. Kabluna. Now, before I want to go to Leah, I just want to say we are running out of time. And this is our last witness. So over to Leah for 5 minutes. And the committee business we're going to do on the next meeting.
I'd like to start out by thanking the committee for its grace to let us go a little bit over. I really appreciate your respect. I just want to start out first asking questions to Madame Kabluna. But before I do that, I do want to offer my condolences about the death of Savannah Pikiuk. It's a tragedy that is unfortunately common and it needs to end. So my condolences to the family and of course, the community. You spoke a lot about violence against Indigenous women. One of the things that you pointed to was a failure of the government to allocate even the 2021 budget. I called for an emergency debate, in fact, in the last session, in response to the fact that in this current 2022 budget, there was zero allocated to address the ongoing genocide against murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. And although, like Madame Smith has indicated, I was very heartened to see Bill C-15 pass. Human rights are only as good as our ability to respect and uphold those rights through action. And so, just a question to you. When you're negotiating impact benefit agreements, are part of the negotiations dedicated to ensuring that monies are allocated to ensure that any projects in communities, there's money allocated to ensure the safety of Indigenous women and girls in Two-Spirit?
I think you're speaking about the Inuit Impact Benefit Agreements that Inuit organizations hold with the mining companies, and they're all different. We have a standard mineral exploration agreement, whereby and Nunavut Dungavik is the signatory with the mining company. Those are more specifically around the royalties and the general conditions that the mining company will operate under. The regional Inuit associations in Nunavut also have an Inuit impact and benefit agreement with the mining company, and those are all different. So they've been evolving. Some of the earlier agreements, I'd say all of the agreements have employment requirements, Inuit employment and training requirements. Those are generally companies are not meeting those targets. They also have contracting requirements. Usually companies are not meeting those targets either. More recently, there have been more advances. So for example, the IIBA with Baffinland had daycares and funding for communities to do social initiatives that they identified as important. And unfortunately, that project, that IIBA is not on an approved project, so the negotiation is likely ongoing. Thank you.
So in I'm just trying to, clarify. So companies will come in, you'll negotiate mining contracts. People will agree on certain things. They are not living up to the agreements. I've seen this we've heard about Manitoba Hydro. I think we're like a living legend in terms of smashing down agreements and disrespecting Indigenous peoples. What are the consequences? And for companies, mining companies that come in and fail to live up to legal agreements, what are the consequences?
We typically go back to the drawing board, and it's more time.
So I just want to understand this. So mining companies come in, you make agreements, impact benefit agreements. They don't live up to the agreement. You go back to the drawing board. While you're going back to the drawing board, are they still benefiting from the extractions that they're taking off your lands and territories, or does it halt until people are respecting their legal obligations?
Thank you, Leah. If Ms. Kabuna, if you can quickly answer that, then thank you.
The projects have not been halted to this point, and I would note that all of the current mining projects are on land that had been grandfathered. So the lease had been agreed to by the federal government, and so the companies have those leases. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kabuna. Thank you, all the witnesses. With that, we will be meeting next week, Monday, September 26th, to commence the study of the mental health of young women and girls. And also, we will address the committee meeting on the next meeting, which is the drafting instruction for this study. With that, it's a will of the committee to adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you for your grace, committee.